Welcome to an expansive life conversation with results architect Sande Golgart and Olympic gold medalist Joe Jacobi. Your journey to realignment from fear to freedom starts now. Live an expansive life.
All right. Wow. Well, here we go. I'm so excited and welcome everybody to this, really incredible opportunity. Kind of another example of expanding life. I have had the distinct pleasure of interacting with Joe Jacobi, who we'll talk about here in a minute. I met Joe through the Outlier Project, which is one of the best networking groups I think both of us have ever been a part of. Very supportive, incredible group of people. And if any of you are looking to connect with like-minded individuals that are looking to expand what they do, please check out the Outlier Project. But we met in Rhode Island. Joe Jacobi was one of the legends that we got to live with. And he and I, just before we left the resort, had an opportunity to get out on some calm waters and kayak together. And since then, it's just been this amazing relationship. Joe Jacobi, for those that don't know, is a two-time Olympian and a gold medal winner from the '92 Games in Barcelona. He was the CEO of USA Canoe and Kayaking. He lives in Catalonia, Spain. He's a thriving coach, igniting midlife peak performance. And I think everyone's going to love having the opportunity to hear from Joe later today. So let's talk about what we're going to do today as far as the agenda, and then we'll go ahead and jump into it. So we're going to have a really quick settling in and making sure that we're all present on today's call. We all have very busy lives. So we'll start with a really quick 3 count of some box breathing just to get present. And Joe and I are going to talk about what expansive life means to us. We'll have some back and forth for about 20 to 30 minutes. And then what we really wanted to do is, as we were having these conversations, and this is probably our 7th conversation, we just realized how much fun we were having. And we thought this kind of conversation really needs to be shared. And people have so many questions about what expansive life means to them and maybe places they're stuck where they feel like their life could be a lot more, but real life situations get in the way, or thoughts or other prisons kind of have us living a more restricted life. So we wanted to open it up and kind of see what was on everybody else's mind. More than anything, share in the fun that we're having with these conversations and explore what it could potentially mean to have and lead, a more expansive life. So, Joe, I don't know if you want to add anything to that before we start with some quick breathing.
All right, let's get into the breathing and then into the conversation. I'm so excited about this, Sande.
Yeah, and we want to welcome another outlier, Lindsay, who just joined. Hey! All right, so just real quick, let's just we'll do 3 really quick, but we'll go take breath in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 4, and then exhale for a count of 8. So we'll start now. For anybody joining that doesn't want to participate, you're more than welcome to say no thank you, but we always find it a great way to get present. So with that, we'll all just go and I'll sort of lead the count. So an in-breath to 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold for 2, 3, 4, and then exhale for 8. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then back with the inhale. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hold 2, 3, 4, and exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Last time in 2, 3, 4, and hold 2, 3, 4, and exhale 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Thank you. Everybody present? So let's kick it off. Joe, I know everyone's dying to hear from you. Like, what does expansive life or living a more expansive life, really mean to you?
Sandy, thank you so much. As I think about this first question, I think one of the things that really attracted me to our conversations is that you and I have had a lot of life behind us where we were living less than expansively. So I'm going to set up my answers to expansive living a little bit as in what was happening in my life when I wasn't living expansively, and then shift those into like what it looks like today. When I wasn't, I was prioritizing other people's growth over my own. I was fearful to kind of feel my own feelings. And I was always looking for singular truths in my life. And since turning 50 and really going through a kind of a big chapter change in life and these amazing last 6 years, I would say what expansive living feels like for me is, above all, I prioritize my own self growth and personal development. And secondly, I give myself the space to fully feel all of my feelings. And third, I give myself the space for more than one truth uh, to be true, and more than one possibility to be true, and that we're capable of holding multiple truths at the same time. And we can dig much more into this, but like as just a very general framework, that does kind of tip into where I am in my physical health, in my mental health, in my emotional health, and in my spiritual health. So that's kind of the beginnings of what an expansive life looks like for me.
As I'm hearing you say that, it reminds me of one of the things we talked about in our conversation where I think there's a big difference between how we verbalize how we want to live and the actions for how we actually live. And I think most people would agree we would prioritize our health as number one. Without it, we're nothing. Number two would be relationships. Most importantly, I think what you're touching on is that relationship with yourself, which then makes you available to others in a much more expansive way. And if we're ignoring ourselves, ignoring our feelings, and just grabbing the wheel of life so tightly, trying to control where it's going, we don't have much room to help and support other people. And then, of course, there's wealth. But I think in practice, for one reason or another, we all have found ourselves at one time or another, or still, chasing wealth at the expense of our health and at the expense of our relationships, both with ourselves and those closest to us. So, when I found this and I was starting to discover it, one of the things that I realized is the place that we're describing really is more of a distorted masculine energy. And that's when you ignore those feelings, you ignore what's going on around you, what's available to you, but you're trying so hard to control everything and then fearful that you might make a mistake. And so expansive living to me, it really comes down to one thing, and it's operating without fear. And I think every spiritual book I've read, looked into, and explored has one basic concept in it, and that is there is no need for fear in your life. Like, to simply do not walk in fear. And so I think to get there, I wanted to start this and then get your thoughts on it. I think the key that I've found to living a more expansive life is A, have the intention, but B is a really important step that I think a lot of people skip over, and our society almost encourages us to skip over, which is you have to create room. So for the idea and the concept to expand, if we're talking about an expansive life, you have to have room to expand. So if I'm just taking all the new biohacks and trying to read more, but I leave the rest of my life the exact same, I haven't created any space that allows me to expand into it. So once I set the intention of what it is that I want, which will be different for everybody, I think it's really important that we take a close look at those people that we're hanging out with. How aligned are we with the way we're living in accordance to the trajectory of where we want our expansive life to go? And I think that is a really important one, because we're all looking for new ways to improve. We're all kind of a warrior archetype that wants to get more done, more on our plate. But if you're full, it's just going to start spilling over and get sloppy. It's not going to allow you to expand. And then from there, just realizing there really isn't anything to be fearful of, and starting to create awareness. And you and I, we just talked this morning about even embracing, almost encouraging, and then falling in love with tremendous gratitude, the hardships that you're going to go through that feel like hardships, but in actuality, they're blessings. What thoughts do you have on that?
So I love this. First of all, when you talk about kind of that ability to hold space for growth and change, just this morning, Sandy. So we mentioned in this conversation, I'm in La Salle d'Urgell. I live at the 1992 Olympic whitewater canoeing course. And we have a number of international teams here right now that have young athletes, between the ages of 15 and 23 years old, getting ready for the junior and under 23 world championships. And I spent the day with the South African canoeing team. And this is a developing country in the sport of whitewater. So I tried to mix my thoughts, my conversation, but I picked up on one theme that you said, that I think in high performance sport, I think the athletes all acknowledge that they like to visualize their sport. And Sandy, you're a Division I basketball player. You know a lot about visualization of high performance. And I asked the question, like, how often does your visualization go perfectly? Like, it just works out every time. And the athletes were like, never. And like, I visualize myself making mistakes, and you got to correct, those mistakes. And I said, that's exactly a huge part of this, is that instead of visualizing perfection, visualize like room for growth and circumstances of change, and prepare for that. And I think when you have that adaptability, we've talked about this in our own development in sport, and the role that sport has had in the development of our life. It's not things going perfectly that are the most memorable moments. It's the things that we had to adapt and were put under pressure that created the biggest moments of growth. So I just really wanted to acknowledge that space, because I think in business, we're often taught, visualize doubling sales, visualize being 5 times more efficient, visualize improving your safety record on the factory floor by 10%, whatever. And it's just, everything is set up around the idea of you're not good enough where you are right now. You got to envision something more perfect than where you are right now, which I think also works to that idea that you were talking about. We got to hold space for change and not just hold ourselves to perfection.
It's so good. There's so much here and on that topic. Just when I think one of the things that I heard Deepak Chopra say a few years ago, that one of those things that you just feel in your heart, there's a reason I'm hearing this, and it means something to me. I didn't know what it was going to mean at the time, but he talked about the idea of thriving in chaos, to the point that you actually welcome chaos. You let go of the control. And I had a really tight grip on the steering wheel of life for a long time. And I was operating from a place of not enough, thinking, I'm going to prove to the world someday that I am enough. And by letting go of that grip and finding more balance just within, I realized how much more effective and more powerful I could be by letting go. And actually now I invite and welcome the chaos and the unknown. And if we just play with those two words or those two sounds and vibration, the known is very limited. What we know actually has limitations all built into it because it's coming generally from past hurt with a future fear. And that's where we're operating from. And if you let go of that and you realize the unknown could be so much more exciting, I might not even be able to imagine how incredible my life could be if I just let go of the wheel, turn up my awareness, and start paying attention and really enjoy life by being fully present. How amazing could that be? And then you're starting to participate in the unknown and watching it unfold and seeing what's there. And that just really resonated with me. And I could pinpoint it in myself that I was wanting to live from a place of knowing how everything was going to pan out, knowing I was going to have enough for retirement, knowing I was doing enough to keep my job, knowing I was doing enough for all these aspects of my life, which is an exhausting way to live. And now I find myself so much more relaxed and welcoming the unknown. And when something pops up that I didn't expect, I actually get excited. I'm like, what's here for me? And I know that's a big part. I love your story about when you guys won gold in 92 and you talked about your ability to adapt to the changes and the obstacles better than the rest of the field. Can you want to expand on that?
Story came up today when I was talking to the young South African canoeist as well, because the way that story goes is that we were not the favorites to win the Olympics. We were not the fastest. We were not the biggest. We were not the strongest. And I always tell people our gold medal at the Olympics is like the least sexy way to win a gold medal at the Olympics. Like, two things that we did really well on the day of the Olympics. One, we corrected mistakes while mistakes were still small. Like, the big mistakes never happened. Like, we fixed mistakes, corrected mistakes really effectively. And secondly, we anticipated mistakes a little bit before they happened, a little bit better than the rest of the field. And normally that sounds really nice in practice or in word, but I think when you tell people, oh yeah, like you can actually, that sounds nice when you're just paddling down, the river for fun. Like that sounds like a good way to run the river, but most people would be, yeah, but you could also win a gold medal at the Olympics actually taking on that way of paddling. And it worked really well for us. And I see it show up in my life in a lot of ways. I think one of the things that's really important about going that route and giving that space for a lot of challenges that come up is you got to find that way to play your own game and to live really by the values that are important to you and not to someone else. But I think that kind of gets into a question that I have for you, because a moment ago you did a really nice job of talking about what the expansive life means to you. But maybe we could also shift a little bit into, I'd love to know from you, Sande, what do you think were some of the real obstacles, hurdles, challenges, resistance from you living an expansive life? Like when you were going through more difficult times, like what did that look like for you? What are the kinds of things that you feel put you more in that disposition of living less than expansively?
I think, for me, what comes up when you ask that question is one word, and it's identity. I know you and I have talked about this a lot. I was trying very hard, and I still struggle with this from time to time, to live up to certain identities and expectations that went with those identities. So when you identify as an athlete, you put certain expectations on yourself. Drastically impacts and affects my golf game and the way I relate to it. I think I should be better all the time because I'm quote unquote an athlete. As a father, I feel these pressures to be something, act a certain way, do certain things. As a husband, as a leader, as a CEO and a president, and you start showing up with an expectation that you have and a conversation going on in the back of your mind that says, I have to, or I'm supposed to, or I should. And then you start judging yourself based on, well, I should have done X, Y, and Z. Or you're getting more critical about your performance because you might not be living up to the conversation going on in your head for how you're supposed to be acting, performing. And then you start the comparisons and then you start the judging. So for me, Joe, when I was able to step back and let go of how I was identifying, that was this unbelievable, unraveling. If you think of this giant hairball of a controlled life, trying to operate in the known, trying to perform and trying to constantly prove that you're enough. I think it was Sadhguru who said, if you want to pull the pin on that hairball, simply grab the string that's called your identity and pull it, and you'll see everything dissolve. And that for me, and Peter Crone talks about this a lot, who's someone I look up to tremendously, which is we don't have any problems. What we have are relationships with circumstances that we perceive as problems, but there really are no problems. And that is just this giant exhale for me to think, all we have are opportunities to learn and thrive and be fully present and see what's there for us. And once I started doing that, I saw like the entire universe shift right in front of me. And I don't know, I think it's Carl Jung maybe who said, like, if once you change the way you look at things, like everything changes. And when I shifted that, for me, it just gave me this much more expansive feeling that I can just be. Like, there's an amazing like kid inside of me that's funny, that's holds space for others, that sees everybody as energy and potential. And I could really like get more present with myself with myself and everything that's in front of me. And by doing that, I started performing significantly better. What's there for you?
First of all, thank you for that. I think it's so important. And I think one of the things that's coming up for me is that I think even as we talk about some of these things, like I think I know you well enough, Sandy, to know we are not suggesting to anyone about going backwards and fixing things. But I think you did a great job of sharing that you are someone that's done the work of willing to go back and sort of see how your life unfolded in different stages of life that have given you this opportunity right now. In other words, it's never too late. I think for me, I think some of the things that come up, I think the first thing, and my canoe partner and I won the Olympics at a young age. I was 22 years old when we won the Olympics. And I think that very quickly after the Olympics, it wasn't like I was doing a lot of planning about life right in those like ensuing minutes after the Olympic race ended. But I do think the process it sort of felt like someone put a crown over your head and a cape around your shoulders and said, here, you got this thing that is a big deal. And so you think that maybe there is like a way to be, maybe there is a way to make some choices about, how you hold yourself, which, by the way, inherently is not a bad thing. What's hard is when you never go back and you check in on those things that you decided when you were 22 years old, and not weeks, months, and years go by, but decades go by. And like, that's where those things become challenging. And I remember, when I was the chief executive officer of the national governing body for Olympic and Paralympic canoeing in the United States, I was in my late 30s, early 40s, and I was living in Oklahoma City. And, we had a few of the energy companies, the big energy companies were sponsors of ours. Sometimes on the weekends, I would go out on bicycle rides with some of the chairmen and CEOs of these energy companies. And Sandy, like I felt like I had to pick myself up to go up to their level, to like just talk to them. And I just felt like such an imposter. Like I felt so fake. Like that was not me. I was not in that same level of leadership or lifestyle, but I sort of felt like, oh, the only way you can have a conversation with someone is to pick yourself up. And it's so funny right now, like in my coaching collaborations, in my creative work, in my personal relationships, I love sitting low. Like I love sitting at a low place and in just holding space for people to come down off the ladder and just like come down and have like a real conversation closer to the ground. And that has been like a huge personal change for me. But getting there meant really walking backwards and understanding like, where did these choices come from to, that made me think I had to exist up at a high altitude that really wasn't my place and really where I belonged. And after having gone through that process, like I'm really good at holding space for anyone like at ground level, and it feels really good for you and for me.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that. I want to go back to something you said about going back and fixing things. And I think one of the things that I've realized is that we're all incredible spiritual human beings having a human experience, and there's nothing to fix. It's fixing the idea that you think you have something to fix. And I've spent 30 years in the corporate world constantly evaluating, where was I coming up short? What do I need to do to get ahead? How do I need to change the way I talk? What words I use? And it wasn't until I realized that I really just need to get back to my authentic self and strip out all of those misconceptions that there's anything wrong with any of us. Like there's kind of consequences to what we do, but you just learn from them and continue to get better with the intention of whatever it is that your intention is. And that helped me on a personal level, like just tremendously. That was probably one of the more significant periods of growth, that I went through, was realizing there's nothing to fix. It's just being more and more authentic. And I think if people can get to that, they'll realize everything we have as humans, I think our number one asset and our biggest liability is that we each hold our own reality in our head, and it's just a conversation. So the way we see the world is nothing more than a conversation happening inside our head. And many of us have developed limiting beliefs or other things that we think need to be fixed or solved. I've come to learn that they really just need to be dissolved. And when you dissolve them and realize you have no problems, you're free to kind of be your authentic self. And that is just another way of stepping into a much more expansive way of being.
I want to ask you one more question. I think when you talk about, some of the emotions, let's call them like above the line emotions, things like love, peace, freedom, acceptance. But then we also have some below the line, feelings and emotions as well. It could be fear, anger, resentment, jealousy, abandonment. I'm just curious, what you take a lot of time not to judge, but just to notice. What happens for you when you notice sort of those below the line? Is it just what does that look like for you when you notice those below the line feelings and emotions?
Well, I think the key word is that I now notice. Before, I didn't have the awareness. I didn't even know. Like I would struggle with things like procrastination or other things that I thought I needed to fix to become something different, right, than what I am. Now, I had done so many life experiments, and as I'm going through them, I now have the awareness to kind of sit with it. Like I'll feel really anxious at a certain point, or I'll feel anger coming on. And what I've taught myself is to allow those emotions to surface, not suppress them, like we talked about in the opening with that more distorted masculine energy that we learned growing up, like don't feel anything, but allow yourself to feel it and say, wow, I feel really anxious. And then I'm able to sit with it now and say, why? What is it that's making me anxious? What makes me feel like I need to do something? Is it aligned with where I want my life to go? And more often than not, I'm finding like it has nothing to do. It's usually the ego or something telling you you need to do something. And now that I can sit with it, I can recognize it, I can honor it, and then just figure out why and where it's coming from. And then I can say, is it healthy for me or is it not? Is this something I need to pay attention to or not? And then I can let it kind of pass through me and get back to just being. Whereas previously, I might let that bog me down for a week, 2 weeks, a month, and then it's compounding like, I'm not doing enough, I'm not staying on top of this. And that compounding can be a very heavy, dense energy that you're carrying with you that can be exhausting.
You mentioned that the most important thing you said right at the top is, now you notice, now you observe. And yeah, the risk of not observing is, it presses down, whether you keep it down and now you're reacting in ways you don't even know that you're reacting, right?
Right.
And I think the beauty of getting to that point where you just start to notice, you start to welcome, you start to accept what is, you also realize that if you're feeling below the line, and we know human facts, like the emotions are going to range up and down below the line, that we are capable of doing great things still, even when we're not feeling above the line. But I do think that if you know that you are feeling certain things, it may affect certain choices. You might notice, oh, I'm feeling X, therefore I may not do my usual text message to my partner at this hour. Maybe I'll just wait a little bit and sit on that for a little while. Or I also know that if I'm feeling below the line in some areas, I know I've trained well to be a good coach. I have had a lot of experience, still leading an effective coaching collaboration. And it's just accounting for what the feeling is and then being confident in the other skills that I've developed. Like, I'm sure in every basketball game that suited up for and, tied your shoes for, you didn't feel the same great 100% self every time out. But it didn't mean you didn't still have the capabilities of going out and contributing positively to the team. And I think that's like this, it all, like you said, it really just comes down to how do we just become more aware and take that moment of pause to notice what is that we're feeling. Don't worry about what it is we're feeling, but just the fact that we are feeling something.
Yeah, and I think one of those emotions that I started to realize and that we all operate from, most every human being is operating from a place of hurt and fear.
Yeah.
And it's past hurt dictating future fear. And when you realize that, you realize, man, most of my life is being dictated by the fear. And if every teaching is telling you don't walk in fear, I was starting to realize I'm operating and living in direct contrast with what all these teachings are telling us. And I've slowly peeled back all the layers. I'm sure I have more to peel, but I've peeled so many back that I realize everything in life, everything in the entire universe is promoting and protecting us, and there's nothing to fear. And when you get there, you're like, shoot, I could take so many more risks. I can have the conversation. I can ask for the business. I can put myself out there. I have nothing to fear. I only have amazing learning opportunities if I'm paying enough attention.
Yeah. I love
That's
that.
a cool place to operate from. So I know a big part of this is we wanted to welcome in a live audience and get their thoughts, maybe questions. I think one of the things you and I have noticed, and with our own awareness, is a lot of these concepts are not new, but everybody deals with them differently. You know, you might say money's not that important, and then you go, yeah, but I have rent coming due. You know, I have real life gets, you know, kind of intertwined. So I'd love to open it up if we can, and just have some people throw out maybe questions or even individual circumstances that they might have. And feel free to either raise your hand, or you can do that virtually, or just raise and speak. And I know Lindsay always has something good to say. Okay, Ivor. Are you, we can. Yeah, welcome. Yeah. Yeah, I think we lost the connection, but we got the point. Are you still there? Yeah, yeah, go ahead. Uh, I'll run with it, and then you can talk. Yeah, we lost you, but you're back. And I think, Ivor, what you're saying is something that I've encountered a lot lately. I used to think one of my strengths was being everybody's hype man. Like, oh, you can do it. You can, you know, you can ignore that pain you're going through and still thrive. And I was really, really good at it. The problem was, what I didn't realize is I was never honoring people's reality. And oftentimes the chaos or the friction that they have going on in life is directly tied to the fact that they never honored their 5-year-old self, the person that had to hear those hurtful things or go through that hurtful reality. And because they've never paid attention and honored and seen, you know, provided space for that 5-year-old version of themselves, they're looking for it out in the external world, and it's driving from a past of hurt, this fear. So they might be looking for acceptance, they might be looking for attention, but that's to make up for the fact that they've never paid attention and honored that person that went through that horrible thing that they went through. And until they are able to, and we're able to give them the space to honor that, to know that it's okay, that that little child didn't deserve what happened to them, but at the same time, there's life lessons, and that has no ability to hold anything over us and rob us from our joy moving forward. Then once you honor it and accept it, you're free to move forward. But if we keep suppressing it, it's always going to have a hold on us. So, Joe, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that's been a huge life lesson for me.
I think it's just sort of maybe piling on a little bit on what you said there, Sandy, is that I even think back to those things that we experienced at a young age. And, you know, I think one of the things that I think about now is like, what skills did I have to combat that? And everyone, by the way, who was around me at that time was trying to do the best they could or what they thought was right, given what their life circumstance was, whether it was parents, whether it was siblings, whether it was a teacher. I mean, a sports coach when you were young. We really have no idea, what was going through. But what I am sure about all of us as our 5-year-old, 10-year-old, 12-year-old, we didn't have the skills and the knowledge and the capacities that we have today. So there is a bit of a time travel piece at play for ourselves and an empathy for our partners, our friends, our colleagues, our coworkers that are doing their own time travel with skills and things that we're learning today that we can go back and acknowledge in the past and start to make some peace or some balancing with what we experience without the skill set that we had at that stage of life.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's one thing here that I want to touch on really quick, and it something I'm learning actively in the present about leadership. And I am changing my whole paradigm on the way I think about leadership, in that I think the primary skill of an amazing leader is to allow the people that they're leading to fall in love with the version of themselves that they get to be when they're around that leader or around that, job or whatever. But allowing them to fall in love with the version of themselves that they get to be when they're around you is the core foundation for becoming, I think, a level 5 leader. Because I've learned so much about how we as humans interact with each other. And we often are mistaken that we're falling in love with the job or we're falling in love with another person. But in reality, when you look closely enough, what you're falling in love with is the version of yourself that you get to be when you show up to work at that place. The version of yourself you get to be when you're with that person that you think you love. It's really a reflection of the love you have for yourself and who you get to be. So when we talk about change, a lot of leaders complain that change is impossible, change is really hard, my team doesn't want to do what I need them to do, and they drift further and further into this world of manipulation, trying to manipulate them to do something that they think they need, when all those people really need is to understand it's safe for them to be the best version of themselves. And once they feel safe and they feel like that's where they get to be and who they get to be, they're going to do whatever they can to fight for that. But when they feel like they're being constantly manipulated, they're going to constantly push back. And I think that's the biggest challenge that we have with leadership in today's world. And I know Lindsay focuses a lot on executive level leadership. I'd love to get her thoughts on that, but that's what I'm seeing. Yeah. Joe, you want to take that one first?
If it's really a small thing, Lindsay, I will. Yeah, no, I'm gonna. If it's okay with you, I'm gonna make it like small, really small. I am so passionate about this, and honestly, with the changes in the world and the developments in technology and the belief of, what people want out of their work, the simplest thing as a human is a walk in nature. I will just continue. I think the way we are progressing, and I have no problems with the way the world is progressing. It's progressing as it needs to progress, but I will always say nature's best days are ahead of itself. I think that I like to talk about connection, of course, connection to others, of course, connection to ourselves. Like that's, the leading point. But I think that one of the biggest jumps in connection for me was my relationship with nature. So I think once upon a time, I always thought of nature as like, oh, that's that place that I go and just it allows me to get away and just let everything drop to the side, which is great. Like that's part of growing the relationship with nature. But what I know now about a walk in nature or a run or a paddle or a ski or just sitting on a park bench and, just noticing beauty is that it's a two-way relationship. I mean, it's something that I look to serve and it is something that serves me. It goes two directions. So I just the answer to the question is it's a walk in nature, but maybe with a more of an open heart. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's great. I think, Lindsay, for me, the one thing I think leaders can do is pay particular attention to the word. Like when we're talking about growth, we're talking about appreciation, right? So a stock appreciates, a company appreciates. That resonates and that has a certain vibration, but where in your organization are you appreciating, right? So if frequency precedes form and you want to appreciate and value, you want to grow, how much of your time are you spending appreciating where other people are at, their contribution, what their capabilities are, and how much they may be showing up and operating from a place of fear? And I think so often we mistake the lover side of us as this soft, weak part, but it can be the most amazing part that precedes and keeps the warrior archetype that we all have as leaders and the king archetype. That if you can appreciate that sometimes one of your employees might just need an energetic or even physical hug to let them know everything's okay, or their 5-year-old self needs that, and that they can be seen and heard, then from that point forward, talk about how do we go and appreciate our customers by providing better products, better services, solutions. How can we appreciate the challenges our customers are having? How can we appreciate what other departments have to go through if we don't get our part right? And I think that if you just embraced the word appreciate and tied it to both growth and what's needed to grow, leaders would change their perspective, change their vibration, and change the amount of power they have by staying in balance. I think, gosh, one of the best books I've recently read is this Carl Jung's book on archetypes, the king, the warrior, the wizard, and the lover. It was very eye-opening to me coming from an athlete that just thought I needed to be this warrior that had no feelings and just needed to do the one that we glorify in movies all the time. But man, when you start to incorporate these other archetypes and find balance, you can show up, you can help your team feel seen, heard, safe, and then know that your job as a leader is then to project a future that everybody wants, everybody benefits from, and then get grounded in the present by how do we appreciate the problems and issues our customers are facing. Let's go solve those with a will to win, you'll get so much more, I think, out of your company. You'll grow. Back to the idea of the unknown versus the known, you will grow and accelerate your results in a way that you couldn't have probably even imagined. How does that land? Uh, awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. We got a live audience. Anybody else? Hillary, I know you have to run soon. Do you have anything?
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's such a good one. I'm trying to keep it really simple in my head because it can get very complicated. But I think that just the idea of even embracing and thinking about, letting go and loosening your grip on what you think, the result needs to be. There's a lot of talk about detachment, surrender. And I think those all kind of tie in, but they're very hard to incorporate because we feel like it's our job to control where something is going. And so one of the things I got called to do was to go to Bali. And I was back in the jungle and I was with the meditation guru. And he showed me and then taught me a way through my own meditation, which he said lacked the intention that I needed, was to meditate and stay in the body, follow your breath inside the body, let the body heal itself, but then go into your heart, open it up, and allow your heart to smile. And you'll watch everything in your life that's in front of you, the external world, start to change. And that has helped me let go. And I'll give you a great example. I just went on a personal quest to do an event called 29029. A year ago, I judged and I hated very hard these endurance events. I didn't know why because I'd never tried one. But I set the intention that I wanted to do it where I took every step joyfully. But what inevitably would get in the way is some thought, some negotiation, some judgment would enter. And I realized I desperately needed, if I was going to take every step joyfully, to find a way to let go of that trauma, that hurt, that judgment, whatever it was that was coming up over the course of 30-hour hike. And the way that I found myself able to do that is anytime I felt that, it was a trap, an energetic trap in my body. I would do that simple meditation, follow my breath in, go to my heart, allow my heart to open up and smile. And immediately I was filled with like more energy. And I realized like I was giving everyone else the space and access to that energy. Because like heart coherence is actually very expansive. You can feel it within 5 feet of you. and anyone around me could feel like this sense of new energy. So just letting go and not fighting it by allowing the heart to smile is one that I would suggest people learn. It's an amazing tactic.
Hillary, I'm a 5-day-a-week runner, and I haven't run with a piece of technology now in more than 6 years. And I'm very much on the same page with Sande as like a technique, even that I use when I know nothing else is going on. All I'm listening to is nature and listening to myself. And I think that one thing is that I want to be clear, like, I'm really not trying to let go, but it's just kind of really understanding where I am and then welcoming the space for feeling. But I think there's a million thoughts I can be carrying in my head. And what I really try to do is to move from my head to my heart when I'm running and just almost just breathe from my heart. And then that just allows me to feel instead of think. I know that it sounds silly, but in the end, you can have a million thoughts, but there just aren't that many emotions to feel above the line or below the line. There's a lot fewer emotions than there are. So if I think about even that process, I think that sets up a disposition for increasing the likelihood that I let go. And I just kind of play with that in that sense of awareness. But it also, I think the one thing that does help me in a movement sense is that I'm not counting my heart rate. I'm not measuring any time or pace or steps. And when I say no technology, I mean nothing, no watch, no phone, no wearable, nothing for 6 years. Like, it's been the coolest experiment that I've ever been on. And I'm not advocating everyone run technology free all the time. But I do think it's a great exercise in thinking about what you can do with that relationship between your head and the heart to sort of set up better dispositions for letting go. I like that idea of kind of breathing from my heart. Oh.
Yeah, thank you for the question. So we have about 2 minutes left. Happy to take another question, but I'm also curious, as we continue these discussions, we're going to do another one on the 8th and a follow-up on the 15th, same time, same place. But I'm curious if there are other topics that people think would be worthwhile in exploring. Right. Yeah, that's a great topic. I think we all have fallen into that trap. And I think there's something to be said for how we manage energy. One of the lives that I've like gone down the deepest rabbit hole with is Einstein. And he was amazingly good at protecting his energy and waiting to be inspired. So a lot of times he would show up to work and really not do all that much. And same with people like Edison and But what they were exceptionally good at is waiting until they felt a sense of inspiration, and then they would channel all their energy into something they were like inspiringly inspired. Well, they were inspired by it, right? And when they had that moment of inspiration, they were no longer operating from I should be, I need to be, I have to. It was like I want to. Like I want to pour everything I have into this thing. And I know people who've worked with athletes. One of the people I've worked with, Dave Meltzer, who's worked with a lot of big time athletes as a sport agent, he said the one unique thing about the best athletes is they feel almost like they have to allow the best version of themselves to come out. Like they're compelled, the Tom Brady's, Michael Jordans of the world, to leave no stone unturned because they know they have something inside of them that needs to come out. But when we're trying to be all these things and we're wrapped up in all these identities, we're spreading our energy equally across multiple levels. And it's very hard to do anything well when we're that spread out. And I think we would all do ourselves a big favor to sit in silence sometimes, appreciate the power of inaction over action at times, and wait for that inspiration when you feel it in your heart, not in your brain, but in your heart that, man, this is where I could do the biggest work. Here's where I could make the biggest impact. Joe, I don't know if you have anything else there.
I think we're set up for an.
Yeah, no problem. I think we need to wrap up as well. But I think, Ivor, I want to thank you because that sounds like an ideal place for us to pick this up next week on the 8th. So, Joe, thank you so much for the time. As always, this is a huge recharge for me every time we speak, and to get to share it with others and have the interaction's been amazing. Thank you to everybody who dialed in. We have video as well as people on the phone. It's been an amazing hour, and we look forward to doing this again. So thank you very much. Have an incredible rest of your week. For those in the U.S., enjoy a safe 4th of July.
Thanks for watching an Expansive Life Conversation. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. See you next week.